special flight attendant, roving flight attendant she is. She works for us, but we'll let the airline think that she works for them. It's okay. So anyway, welcome to you guys and welcome everybody out there watching us this week. Another episode of Cleared for Takeoff. No, wrong. Fearless Flight Live. What day is it? Okay. And again, this is a place you want to be if you're afraid to fly, or you know somebody who's afraid to fly, or you just plain like to talk about accidents, incidents, and other things about aviation. So here we go. First thing out is, of course, our weekly reminder that if you have not joined our Birds of a Feather Facebook group, please do that. It's a great place to connect with other people who have either worked through their issues on flying or are in the process of doing that. Great place to drop in. Please register or sign up with us and to be a member, and leave a remark, introduce yourself to everybody, and come and join the party there. So tonight we are going to talk about, we got a poll question for you coming up. And then I had a 15-minute call coaching session this week, one of several this week. And it just has some of the basic things. And I thought I'd introduce you to the whole concept. If you're kind of on the fence and you're nervous about making a call like that, and we'll talk a little bit about the things that came up in there. We are going to have our Diane's going to tell us about a little bit of a fun trip she had this week, and then we'll close with the aviation news roundup. And in the course of the evening or the show, we will talk about all things fear of flying. So the poll question. Imagine this is a headline. Watch, panic as passengers hold on for dear life during unfortunate plane incident. And you can imagine there was a video there. All right, if you saw this, maybe you did see it. It was in the news. After reading the headline, my fear or anxiety about flying would A, increase, B, decrease, C, wouldn't bother me. Okay, so throughout the show, or if you're watching the replay in this, leave us a vote in there. Tell us which one that would be the most likely to happen for you. Okay, I mentioned that this week I had a coaching call, and this came in from a fellow. We'll call him Randy for the time being. And if you haven't ever done a 15-minute coaching call, please consider doing that. Unless you're completely satisfied. If you're completely satisfied and on your way to being a fearless flyer, then you probably wouldn't even be here in the first place. But if you haven't and you haven't registered for a coaching session, please do that. One of the things that you'll complete is a little bit of an intake there. So the questions that I ask you are, do you fly regularly? Yes or no? Do you have plans to fly in the next 90 days? That's important because it helps me decide where we should start and how fast we need to get after it. And then the next one is, the answer to that one in this particular person's case is, yeah, wants to go to August with his fiance, and wouldn't you know it, she likes to fly, and the pressure's on. He hasn't flown for a couple of years. I asked people when they first noticed it to get a feel for how long they've been afraid to fly. We didn't get a specific answer to that. The average person waits 10 years before they actually try to do something about it. So you don't have to wait that long. This particular person, one of the things, the triggers for that, for him was feeling the sensation on takeoff. He gets heavy anxiety, sweaty hands, fast, hard breathing. And of course, those are all validating symptoms of the fact that your sympathetic nervous system has been triggered, and it's telling you to get ready for whatever it's coming, even if it really isn't coming. So when we talk about that, one of the things we wanted to emphasize was that let me make sure I didn't lose my place here. Yeah, okay. We do have this, our new Clear for Takeoff 201 global online course that we are going to launch whenever Ron gets his productivity gear in gear. So this is one of the things I'll touch on, not the course so much, but when I talk to Randy, the things we talked about are how the brain, and this is all from module 1. We're just going to highlight this over the next few weeks, just prior to launch, to give you an idea of what topics are in there. Follows along with the book. Big plug for the book. If you don't have the book, you should have the book, because it's a really, really good resource. And how do we know? Because we said so. No, because we get a lot of good feedback and we got a lot of good reviews on the book. But the book serves both as a guide for me setting up this course, and it's kind of a textbook for the course. And it's a great way to get over your fear of flying. So back to thing. In module 1, we talk about the psychology of fear of flying, which is extremely important to know. And we're born to worry, not literally worry, even though we do a lot of that, but with a brain that began to notice patterns for future problem solving. When we started to evolve in this manner about 50,000 years ago, so we always had a brain that was always triggered to protect us defensively. That's the limbic system. And that goes back, oh my God, that goes back probably somewhere between 3 and 6 million years in organisms, and the last million years in mammals. But when we started to evolve, when we started to stand up, we started to talk to each other, and some of the higher functions, we developed this prefrontal cortex up here, this last pound and a third of gray matter that we got. And this is when we developed the ability to do some planning for the future. The first thing we noticed was patterns out there. And how do you think we use those patterns? How do we put them to work? We tried to remember them so that particularly if it was a fearful or a threatening circumstance, that we could store that for use down the road if we needed to. We're natural born storytellers. That when we evolve, when the part of our brain evolved to speak to our fellow man, fellow species, the way we conveyed message and meaning in the world is storytellers. And we don't just tell stories to each other, we tell stories to ourselves. So that little voice that's always going on in your head is a living evidence of that storytelling feature of the brain. Okay, so ultimately what I shared with Randy, and I would share with you in a similar coaching session, would be that what we have to do is we have to learn how to change that story. Because the story is what's causing all the problems for you. Because when Diane gets on the flight, or Dieter gets on the flight, or Eric's on the flight, or I'm on the flight sitting next to you, the difference between us not being afraid to fly and you with all these things that are going on up there is the stories that you're telling yourself. We're thinking about, if it's me, I'm thinking about what am I going to eat when I get to the destination? And you're thinking about, are we going to make it? Or am I going to make it? Am I going to lose it here? So again, from module 1, just a quick review. Fear of flying is a process. And we talk about, it's not a thing, it's a process. So you're not going to get over it overnight. You may have breakthroughs, which we've had people do over the years, but it's not likely that you're going to have a one-time experience and you're immediately gonna fix yourself. So quit waiting for your anxiety to go to zero, because it's not going to do that. In fact, we have in the course, we have exercises. So we try to get your anxiety to elevate in controlled circumstances with guidance from us on how to do that, and then calm yourself back down. And Diane's going to share a story again from her experiences this week that's going to show you even the most professional crew member has to go through that process sometimes. Okay, fear versus anxiety and worry. The problem with fear, as you all know, this is kind of a repeat of the basics about fear of flying, is fear is a bona fide, legitimate, important emotion that we have as human beings. It alerts us and grabs our attention and says, pay attention, you're in danger. The problem is anxiety and worry use the same mechanism, the same wiring, if you will, but it doesn't have to be a real threat. So one of the downfalls to our brain, particularly the amygdala, that part of the brain that we call the fear center, is that it's not able to distinguish whether the threat is real or imagined. It functions the same way no matter which one it is. Okay. Talked about the amygdala, and once it gets triggered, it triggers the biology, which results in a whole network of physiological experiences, and that's where you are. And what most of you notice is racing thoughts about what could happen, or just feelings that become overwhelming because they're so painfully engendered in you that you equate the fact that if anybody felt this badly, certainly it must be based on the fact that we're in real jeopardy. Not true. Has nothing to do with the circumstances you're in. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about is just a quick review of the triggers. These are the things like turbulence, like weather, thunderstorms that cause your amygdala to activate this physiological process in you. There's two types of them. One is mechanical, and that refers to things really like the mechanics of flying, things that you would think about, normally generated by one of the pathways, which is from your cortex to your amygdala. And then the other ones are emotional. Those are the ones that come from your autopilot. Nobody has to tell you about that. If I sneak up behind you, as soon as you get the sixth sense that I'm about to strike you, your amygdala automatically takes over. It does not require thought. It does not require anything from your prefrontal cortex. It automatically activates. So those are the two kinds of things, and the way you treat them are different. The mechanical ones, we use the prefrontal cortex against itself. That is, we learn something about flying or whatever the issue is that we have. And the ones that are emotional, that involve the amygdala, we learn how to down-regulate that so that we can literally make friends with our anxiety. And this is the thing that perplexes most people. No matter whether you get triggered by mechanical triggers or from emotional triggers, it ultimately ends up with these strong waves of emotions that you feel. And the only way through those is going with them and making friends with your anxiety, making friends with your discomfort and your worry. And that's something that it is counterintuitive to the way most people think, is that, they want like a pill or some way that you can get over this without having to do the hard work there. And it's one of the things that Dieter was reminding me the other day. I'm making an intro video, and he said, make sure that you emphasize that you got to do the work. You can't just read this or watch the videos. You got to do the work. So, okay. So Diane had a bit of a cheap thrill this week. And she shared it with us. We have a little group chat amongst ourselves. So Diane, take it away.
Well, I had a really nice little 2-day trip this weekend. It was interesting because I flew on 2 different aircraft that I haven't been on in a long time. A CRJ-200, which is a little tiny plane, only 50 passengers. And then, and that was up and back to Colorado from Salt Lake City. And then I flew on another aircraft, which is the CRJ-900, which is the biggest one that I've flown on. And we flew from Salt Lake City into Montana, and we were getting ready to land. We were really, really close, probably about 10 feet off the runway. And beautiful day, gorgeous, wonderful, all those kinds of things. And just as we were getting ready to touch down, we powered back up and we went back up, and I was like, oh, okay. That was interesting. It gave me just a, tiny little bit of a startle.
We could see it in your eyes as you retold the story.
It was. And yeah. I was sitting aft. And so, as we were getting closer, I always am looking out the window for all kinds of different reasons. And besides, it was beautiful out there. And so as I'm peeking out, and I could see the runway, and we were almost down there, and up we went again. I said, oh, okay. But it was like that. Okay. Just for a moment. And after that moment, then my quick little startle thing went away completely. And
so let me interrupt. So, sure. Which is my best quality. So when the instant that they changed direction and you felt the acceleration and the power, yeah. What was the first thought that you recall went through your mind?
The very first thought, oh gosh.
I'll give you some choices. Probably this isn't normal. Okay.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
We're,
Definitely.
we,
Yeah.
you
Something's happened.
might not have said we're about to die, but the
No,
emotional the in that brief moment, the equivalent of that. Okay.
something happened. I was like, oh man, something
Right.
just happened.
Like that's not right.
That's not right. That's not usual. That is not a
Right. Right.
usual thing
Yeah.
to
That's
happen. Not
not
when
my
you're,
experience.
that's
Yep.
not my experience. Not 10 feet off the runway. I mean, not just 10 feet up in the air to do that. That was different. That was really different.
And again, I'm watching your eyes right now retell it. And even though you were the trained professional that you are, with all your years of experience, people looking at you, what do people tell us? Who do they look at in flight when they get nervous?
The flight attendants. Always.
Somebody looked at you and probably was okay. I guarantee you, some person, at least one person, looked at you and said, "Oh my God, she's surprised too."
Well, fortunately,
well, you're in the back.
I was aft, but I have been in a somewhat similar position sitting forward. And you're absolutely right. If all of a sudden there's big turbulence, whatever the situation is, the first thing that happens is the passengers look right at you because they want to see what your reaction is. And after, if it's a real quick little startle reaction, then the next thing we all try to do is smile a lot so that we engender a lot more of calm in our passengers. But this instance, it was like, whoa, this is new. And then we powered back up, we went up. And one thing that you and Eric have talked about that is really, really important and that we know about as flight attendants is that you guys are busy up there. Okay, there's stuff that you're doing and talking to each other about. And at that, for those moments, you are not in the position to call us back. And so once we got up enough altitude, then the captain got on the interphone and called us, the flight attendants, and said, this was the situation there. We were cleared to land, but there was, at the last minute, there was a vehicle on the runway. And so the tower said, give us a boarded landing and go around. And then after the pilots, a captain said that to us, he said, I'll make an announcement to the passengers, which is what he did. At that point, after he spoke with us, then he got on the PA system and explained the situation to the passengers so that they would understand what happened. Basically, no big deal, went around, made another approach, nice smooth landing, and everything was just fine.
Do you remember about just, I mean, roughly how long it was between the aborted landing or the go around, as we call it, and the PA to the passengers?
I did not time that, but
but I mean, within 5 minutes or?
Oh, probably not even 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Probably about 4 minutes. Not that long. Not that long.
So
really.
So the crews years ago, we were much less aware of that,
Right.
but particularly since 9/11 and the increased awareness of people in the back and how important and freaked out they get. That's good. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, and it wasn't that long. It wasn't really that long.
Yeah. And so Eric, are you hiding out?
No, Dieter censored me.
Oh, he censored?
Yeah, he censored he took my picture off. So, but I'm still here listening. And it was very polite of you. It was very polite of you to let her out of the top 2 flight attendant reactions right when the go around starts. 1, I'm deliriously happy because I'm going to make an extra 15 minutes of flight pay while they take a scenic route around town.
That's true.
2, I'm enraged at these losers because they're going to make me miss my commuting flight home. It's either one or the other.
Well, I came close when we were going from that airport back to Salt Lake City. We landed about 20, I don't know, even more than that. We landed about 20 minutes early, but there was so much traffic in Salt Lake City that we sat on the tarmac for about 35 minutes. And then of course, in order for me to deplane to get to my next flight, I had to hustle, and I wound up getting a delay on my record, which we deal with. That's not going to be a problem. But just so all the passengers understand that when you're delayed a little bit, I mean, it's can be an inconvenience, but for me, it could mean a mark on my report card because then I had to run, literally, I had to run through the terminal to get to my next flight. It's anyway, but
yeah. So let's close.
It's kind of a domino effect.
Were the pilots did they have to go on too, or
no, they didn't. I was the only one. I was on a really weird schedule. I was on a really weird schedule.
For everybody out there, if this happens to you or anything like that, you've heard me say this before. I want you to debrief the pilots. If you have any anxiety by the time you get to the gate, I want you to ask the guy. Say, hey, you got a minute? Back there, that was kind of a whoopsie-doo maneuver there. And I didn't like that so much. Could you tell me a little bit about that? What you need to do is connect with them. Connect person to person, human being to human being. Forget about the fact that it's a pilot. That helps in the background. You need to connect with somebody who was in charge of that to have them bring you to the same sense of closure that they were, or that they got to, and Diane got to, because they were crew members and they had some inside knowledge about that. Do not leave a flight in trauma. Okay. So that's the main thing I would say about that. Just the reasons. In this case, Diane said it was actually a vehicle on the runway. They later heard that it was, there are vehicles that drive around the airport. They test the runway all day. They look for somebody who may have left parts of their tire on there, or, or a bird may have died or anything like that. So there's ops trucks that do that. They are connected with two-way radios to talk to the tower. And sometimes the radio quits.
Yeah. Okay.
And sometimes the tower can't get word to them. Okay. But that's more the exception than the norm, I would say. When you, Eric, the most common reason is we're landing where Diane was, and there's another pokey guy, an airliner maybe, or anybody who's all the way down. They might be down at the end of a 10,000-foot runway, and you're just about to touch down. It doesn't matter that by the time you would ever land and get down there, they're already at the gate. The tower is not legal, not authorized to let your wheels touch, and for purposes of landing, coming to a full stop, until that airplane is fully clear. So that might be why they went. And literally, I have been in an airplane and we knew it. We're watching the guy down there, and we're knowing that if he doesn't clear in the next 3 seconds, that the tower is going to make us go around. And when they say landing clearance canceled, execute a go around, you're obligated to do that. And you may actually touch down in that process. So it's not a big deal. And from people who are bugged by takeoff, Eric, what's different about a go around from an initial takeoff?
Well, I'll just back up to this while we're on the go around, but it's so funny. I remember the ones, and you're watching the guy on the runway. He goes, "Oh, I'm going to take this taxiway. No, we'll go back over here. And now I'm going to take this." And you're going, "Oh my God, he's not going to." And it's weaving around. You're going, "Oh." So they're having an argument about which taxiway is most scenic, and you go, "This is not going to end well for me." For exactly what you're saying, you can't occupy the runway like that at the same time during the landing. And the question I would most frequently get from passengers after was, "Why did you wait?" And not, "Oh my God, we're almost died," or "Oh my God," they'd say, "Why did you wait until we were so low?" And the reason we waited and the tower would wait is because there's always hope that the vehicle or the other airplane or whatever it is will clear it in time, and you can land and save all the drama, and it'll be fine. But until it, that doesn't become clear until the bitter end, when it's time to give up and they tell you to go around, you execute the missed approach.
And at a busy airport, during a busy time, a rush hour, you've got a tower, you've got approach control. Those are the guys that hand the guys off to the tower controller, which is basically the last 10 miles. And when they hand it, so I'm out there flying, Eric's coming in right behind me. They're trying to put tape typically on the same runway 3 miles between us, because that normally gives the airplane that's landing time to decelerate and turn off the runway. And sometimes the tower or the approach control screws up a little bit, not screws up, but they're trying to get a bunch of airplanes in there with the minimum spacing, and maybe we don't slow up as fast as they thought. So now we close that gap. And so there can be a myriad of reasons about that. But what do you need to know? One, you're going to be anxious. Okay. So this is kind of that theme tonight. You're not going to get over it. There's no way to prepare yourself for that. You're going to have to learn to get over it. And you're going to have to learn to make friends with that anxiety and hang out with people like us and learn why these things happen, so that you can be like Diane. You can be even like Eric and I. Even though you're startled to somewhat, immediately you take control of that amygdala by telling it when messages appear, healthy self-talk. That's okay. That was just one of those times. Okay. You don't have to go into, oh my God, we almost died. Oh my God, what the hell are they doing? And that's the things that you do as inexperienced flyers.
Well, and point number two that I was going to get in with a wait to clear from down low is the other reason it's startling is the airplane's now very light because you used all the fuel that you were going to use on the en route burn and that sort of thing. And you have a decent amount of airspeed. So the initial performance at the start of the climb is quite surprising if you're not ready for it. I shouldn't say explosive, but I like it anyway. It's explosive initial climb performance because the airplane has all that superior climb ability from the speed and the lightweight. So that makes it more startling than it would have been. And then air traffic control essentially made another arrival for themselves because now you're turning around and they have to figure out which side or how they're going to refit you because you just turned right around, pulled the 180, you're going to get back in the pattern. They made an extra airplane to deal with, so it's mildly annoying for them too. It's not fun.
And in contrast to a normal takeoff, as Eric was alluding to, when you're at a normal takeoff, you're starting from zero energy, zero airspeed at the end of the runway. When you're doing an aborted landing or a go-around maneuver, you are already flying. You've already got all that energy. As a matter of fact, we're in the full procedure is to put maximum thrust on, raise the nose to 15 degrees, and raise the landing gear. And I know most of us, if we're flying along at a good speed and it wasn't a critical, wasn't critical that we get away from the ground really, really quickly, I wouldn't use full power because it's more upsetting to you in the back. It's like doing those takeoffs at Orange County in California, if you've ever done, where you go shoot for the moon there right off takeoff, because we don't want to do that. But you will typically notice the greater amount of energy or the accumulated energy right there compared to takeoff. Because we're already flying. Go ahead.
It was pretty powerful. I mean, after that,
when the lower they are, the more they're going to use.
After that really short startled thing, we really zoomed right up there. I mean, I enjoyed it, but and I couldn't see all the faces of the passengers, but it was enthusiastic at that point. We really you could tell the power and the attitude as far as our leaving the runway area again and going all the way around and let's try it again. So
nobody's immune.
Way better choice of words, enthusiastic. It just wasn't coming to me rather than explosive.
I like that. But I wanna also just note a comment from Jim Duke. And thanks so much, Jim, for sharing that, because he had a takeoff out of Las Vegas, I think, to back to Ontario after he took the cleared for takeoff 201 class. And what happened was there was a lot of crosswind, I think about 40 miles, Jim rode. And what he did was he waited when they landed in Ontario until everybody else deplaned. And then he talked to the pilot, and the pilot was great. And he explained everything. Like you said, don't ever leave a plane in trauma or how I would say it, with your own story intact. Because that's usually not a good story. And what Jim did is exactly what we're teaching you is talk to the pilots, talk to the flight attendants afterwards.
I would say half the people who schedule 15-minute coaching calls with me have a bad experience from before. And almost all of them did not, or never thought about it, didn't consider the possibility of doing a debrief right there. So, and that doesn't matter. You can be, well beyond your fear 25 years from now, flying along and have another bad experience with turbulence or something that kind of triggers you. Always look for a debrief. Okay. So, and you can, during the flight, you can ask the flight attendant. If you don't like something, say, hey, I'm a little scared. Or can you tell me a little bit about what's going on? Or what are those guys doing? Are you sure they're awake or whatever? You're not a victim. You can take charge of yourself. You can learn how to take control of yourself. So, okay, here's a cute little story in aviation, and maybe we can raise some money for it too. I have a whole network of pilot nuts here, and this is a little girl. I remember when she got her license. It was 8 years ago now, according to the recap in the story there. Her name happens to be Jessica Cox, and she's in the news because, as you can see there, and you have to kind of look closely, like I did at first, and to see that she has no arms. Go figure. I remember when she made the news, and and she's about to make a celebratory flight for two reasons. One, the particular type of airplane, kind of an antique airplane that she's going to fly, and it's coming up on its, what was it? Was its 50th year, 80th year, maybe 80 years since it was done, I think. Yes, because I think, and then the other occasion is the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is the same act that I encourage you, if you're afraid to fly, to use to qualify for early boarding. So this little gal is making a celebratory flight, and there's a retired Senator Tom Harkin, who also he happens to be a licensed pilot, and he was one of the co-sponsors of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so they're going to have this little festive occasion there, and maybe Dieter could put the link in there to the website there. They're looking for donations, so you can sponsor on a bunch of different levels. So, and we're not involved in this at all, but I saw it in the news, and I thought it was kind of a good feel good story there. So, okay. Here's another, just a routine, moving on. Here's a routine message that I get. I get many of these every week from you all out there. Again, I'm trying to encourage you, schedule a 15-minute coaching call if you haven't done. Look in the notes here. You'll find the link. Ask us questions. You know, not necessarily just in the meetings here, but anytime, anywhere. You know, if you have something happens, send us a message. I get lots of messages, tons of messages all the time from people. And this one was one from a person that's been in FearlessFlight fairly recently, and she said, "Is it safe to fly now?" Back on the COVID-19. So I figured we'd cover that again, since it's still in the news. More so, we're number one, Arizona. We have the highest per capita positive testing rate of anybody in the nation, at least up until yesterday, I think it was. So this is essentially the contents of this the exchange here. She asked me, "Have you flown, Ron, or would you fly? Is it safe to fly now?" So I said, "I've actually flown. I did, as you mentioned, or I mentioned to you earlier in the month of June. It turned out to be my birthday. We did an advanced class where we took a couple of fearful flyers, or people had gone through the 201 class, and we flew to Las Vegas and back. And what I put in her is, she's, when she said, "Is it safe to fly now?" First, I needed to know the context for sure. Is she talking about in general as a fearful flyer, or because of the COVID-19? And she confirmed it's because of the COVID-19 in this, the basis for this question. And so I emphasized to her that it's your confidence that's important. Whether it's confidence that the airplane is going to be okay, confidence that you're not going to lose control emotionally, in your flight, or confidence that you're going to fly protected from the COVID-19 virus. Diane's been out there. I mean, how many flights have you got since you've been back now? Just
1, 2, 12 at least.
Yeah. So you're out there. You're out there in there. I assume you're watching people practice safe distancing. You're watching
Absolutely.
all the things going on. Personally, right now,
they have to wear their mask into the airport, onto the plane, while they're on the plane.
Yeah.
So we were talking about that. The other flight attendant and one of the pilots on one of our sets, about how clean the planes are. All of us have been flying for anywhere from over a year for me up to 15 years. And we all say we have never seen our planes this clean ever. It's just amazing.
Yeah. So that's more in the there's two themes that I can think of. One, whenever we have an accident, you've heard me talk about the fact that it isn't just the cause of the accident that comes to light. It's other collateral issues that didn't have anything to do with the accident that we also learn from. you know, and that's one of the beauties of aviation and the regulation and the compliance that's required in here. So again, out of COVID-19, we're seeing cleaner airplanes. Who would have thought, right? I mean, before that, we used to laugh about how dirty the airplanes probably were. Not in the sense of the filthy germ, although it probably was ignorance about that, but just in general from the amount of dirt that you can have from people carrying on in their shoes all the time. So anyway, so that's what I shared with her. I said, you know, you have to, you know, you have to make this decision on your own, and you have to inform yourself. And we've tried to do that here, keeping up with what the CDC guidelines are. And ultimately that's your decision there. Personally, right now, unless I had a really burning need to fly, I wouldn't fly. Okay. Why? Because I'm afraid of flying? No, certainly not that. Because I'm afraid of the COVID-19? Not really. Okay. It's just that why expose myself and why expose my 94-year-old mom to that? So anyway, and the other people that I hang out with. So anyway, then, and one of the things she mentioned is she happens to live in Texas, and it's a hot spot for COVID-19 right now, like Phoenix is here. And so her specific concerns were, she says, I'm wondering how bad it would be to be on a plane while the numbers are going up and the hospitals are full. Well, that's two separate issues. Okay. Diane has tried to share with us what it's like on an airplane. And as she said, they're super clean. They're very mindful of keeping them super clean. And everybody's mindful of the CDC guidelines for wearing masks and protecting yourself from everybody else. The second part of that is the hospitals filling up. Well, that depends where you're at. If you should become infected and you need hospital care, if you happen to be, you know, even in the Phoenix metro area, you guys can back me up on this. There are some hospitals that are at capacity or near capacity, and they're moving people to places where they aren't. Okay. And that's the big fear. If you know, I sent out a video to the people in our last 201 class online, and it was well done. Maybe we'll put a link in the show notes for that. And it shows really what the basis is for keeping the curve as flat as possible. It's not ultimately, I mean, ultimately it's so that we don't get sick, but it's the main reason is so that we don't overload the facilities. So you die waiting in the waiting room because you can't get into a hospital that's overwhelmed with other COVID-19 patients. Okay. So
I'll throw this plug in for all the airlines. I saw today, I was watching the news and the map, and it was talking about the states and the infection rate. And I was stunned to look up there and see Arizona is a green thing. And according to the color code, we had dropped 50% in terms of rate of new infections from this last week as opposed to the week before. And I go, wow, we were among the leaders. The population centers, we were taking out Florida and Texas, which was pretty impressive with our population base to be able to knock those guys off the medal stand. But here we had dropped 50%, and the time period correspond to exactly the time period where the governor said, okay, the bar is closed, literally the bar is closed, and you gotta wear a mask anytime you go inside. So this dropped, I can't imagine it's luck, this dropped the rate right on that time deal, and the airlines are being really good about making sure everybody's masked up in the airport anyway, masked up in the airplane, and the airplane clean. So I got to believe that's a good indicator for if you have to be in the airplane, you can do it intelligently and minimize the risk.
Diane, I have a quick question to that from Michelle. Michelle is asking, what about during the flight? Like, you know, there's pictures, I guess, circulating around where people are not wearing masks.
Right.
What's the deal while you're
in flight? Yeah, while you're in flight. The passengers are required to wear a mask. They can, obviously, if they are eating or drinking, they can remove their mask, lower it, what have you. There are some individuals who do, there are some exceptions to the policy about mask wearing for some folks that have a medical condition or some other kind of condition, and they are exempt from that. We are not allowed to ask why if we see a passenger who's not wearing a mask. They may just tell us I have an exemption. And so we need to abide by that. I've not found anybody or talked to anybody or had a situation in that regard. There's been a few people, as I think I mentioned last week, a couple of folks, this one individual in particular, who had to have a mask on to board, but then he removed it. And after a few tries by the forward flight attendant and one try on my part, we explained it to him that he wouldn't be allowed to fly anymore if he didn't have his mask on. So there will be times when people don't have them on. Is it being abused? Whether or not that someone is taking a long time to drink a bottle of water and so they keep the mask off, probably. I have not seen anything egregious on my flights because I'm on smaller planes, so I see everybody. And I've not seen anyone abusing the system yet, really.
I think, again, what Eric touched on is the fact that we're becoming more mindful.
Yes.
You know,
yeah.
One of my favorite quotes is from Stephen Covey, who said that nothing breeds failure like success. And what he meant is we're creatures of habit. And so why should I change my behavior if it's always working out? Right. In aviation, we're no longer worried like we would have been, 75, 100 years ago in aviation about the mechanics of the airplane failing, about the pilots making some stupid mistake, although we still are the greatest perpetrators of making mistakes and the reason when we do have accidents, albeit at a very reduced rate. But the thing that is the hardest for us as pilots now, and Eric can back me up on this, is the longer we go and everything works perfectly, the more the temptation is to drop your guard. Okay. And fortunately, the times that you all can tell me that you read in the news all the time about the worst times, the riskiest times are takeoff and landing. Guess what? Those are also the times when Eric and I are the most interested in the flight. Okay. And I can guarantee you, as I got older, I became a better pilot because I was much more mindful of literally making the takeoff and staying completely focused and daring one of the engines to quit, daring something to go wrong, and being right there on the edge like I would be in the simulator. And so I think that's what we're seeing. Eric mentioned Arizona has had a noticeable drop in the infection rate. I just read an article today about Florida. Literally in the last 2 or 3 or 4 days, they are noticing some subtle drops. I guess it went back up again today. But I do believe that, without criticizing anybody, young people in particular, I mean, that's why the young people probably were the ones that really got this thing going when most of the states said on Memorial Day said, hey, not to worry. And because they went out there and they said, I'm invincible, I don't get sick, and you telling me I'm not going to die from it. Well, that's changed a little bit. And so I think we are seeing hopefully an increase in global mindfulness about how serious it is. And touching on what Diane said about in-flight, I noticed just going to the grocery store that it fogs my glasses. It's 110 degrees out here in Arizona, but it still fogs my stinking glasses when I've got the mask on. And it's annoying to me. So when I'm not around anybody in the grocery store, I drop it down below my nose a little bit, or I raise my glasses over my head. And I do that. But when I'm near people and all that, I'm very mindful of being respectful of them and the space around us. So anyway.
When I'm on board, the only time I drop my mask it's an option for us is when I'm giving an announcement.
Yeah.
And the last few times I've been aft, and the aft flight attendant gives 99% of the announcements on our aircraft. And it's very difficult for me to do that with the mask on, and sometimes those PA systems are a little wonky to begin with. And if you add in the filter of the mask, it makes it more difficult for the passengers to hear. So I will drop it just for that period of time.
Yeah, there's aerodynamics, but there's blowback when you talk into the mask.
I know it's bad enough. Sometimes it's more difficult enough as it is. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, when I flew fighter type airplanes, that was one of the things you had to get used to, was talking into a mask, because it changes the dynamics and your speech patterns and all that. And then, and if you're high altitude and you, for whatever reason, you got pressure breathing, now the oxygen is being blown at you. That was a real treat. When we would normally experience that in the altitude chamber every 3 years when we get recertified for hypoxia and all that. But it was really difficult to talk when the oxygen mask is blowing at you. Okay, great group there. getting carried away here with the time. Last thing in the news here, my favorite out of the headlines. And this one, Saudi Arabia, so we can probably distance ourselves from that, say, well, I'm not going to be traveling to Saudi Arabia, so why should I worry? But we're just going to talk about, in this era, on top of your fear of flying, we're much more spring-loaded to react. And that's what fear of flying is all about. It's about learning to manage your overreactivity to something like this. So here's a headline in the news, and it was an Indigo Airlines plane over in Saudi Arabia that encountered some turbulence. And as you can see in the headline there, watch, panic as passengers hold on for dear life during unfortunate plane incident. Okay, just look at the words in there. Reminds me of declining sentences in English there. Watch, hey, heads up, I'm going to scare the pants off of you. You're going to plummet after this one. All right. Panic as passengers hold on for dear life. Well, that's not too subtle. During an unfortunate plane incident, like there are fortunate plane incidents, and it implies, when it calls it an incident, that an incident in aviation means that there was something that happened procedurally, but no injuries and no property loss. Okay. So the fact that they use incident in the title is kind of like oxymoronish, if not moronish, because it implies that there was nothing that really happened out of that. And when you read to the very, very bottom of it, we'll look at the statement here at the end there. And it has a terrible video. The video, I think, is about a minute to a minute and a half long. And except for a few moments in there, what you see is black with people screaming in the background. Okay. And when one person screams, it's like one person vomiting. Everybody around them takes on the same behavior. So it's very infectious. And
I'm only going to interrupt you for a second. I was trying to, because I know you bring that up when we talk about aircraft accidents and aircraft incidents. We'll do that sometime. And an accident is when one passenger loses their life or is seriously injured. And by seriously injured, I mean like they flew off the bobsled track at the Olympics and they're looking around for his DNA.
Yeah.
Seriously injured or dies within 30 days of the deal. And an incident is when that does not happen or accident substantial damage of the aircraft. And I go, okay, what's substantial damage of the aircraft? I was going through the legal deal. I couldn't find it, but the dollar amount is unbelievable. The airplane can be smashed to a pulp and it's not an accident. It really takes some significant damage to go over the bar from incident to accident.
Yeah. It's close. It's close, if not a complete hull loss for many of them. So, okay. And so here's the things that they included in the article. It says, as I mentioned, the video has no picture for most of it with people screaming. And then here's the word picture that they paint. Very short article, really. Passengers, all of whom wore masks. So they even threw in the COVID-19 thing there. So, let's not miss any of the panic opportunities here. Okay. Wore mask, let out screams as the plane rocked fiercely midair. Have you ever had an airplane rock fiercely, Eric, in your life that you can remember?
No, just the regular kind.
Yeah, just the regular kind.
Not the fierce kind.
Way back and forth.
That'd be terrible.
And it says
regular rocking.
The regular kind.
The elderly lost their balance despite having seatbelts on. Tell me how you lose your balance when you're strapped in your seat securely with your seatbelt on. Okay.
I've never seen that happen.
Yeah, it's an oxymoron. Okay. And then praying when the plane shook heavily, recited verses from the Holy Quran. If it happened over Alabama, it would be the Holy Bible, I'm sure. But again, so little footnote is praying has been determined to be a form of mindfulness and meditation. So, but praying to say, oh God, I'm going to die, that's not the kind of praying I would recommend. I would recommend the part that's more mindful. This is something, yes, I am scared. Yes, I am upset. And yes, it will pass. That's the kind of praying that I would engage in, because that's the kind that's going to reinforce your confidence in the whole thing. And the official statement said, yes, we had this flight and it experienced turbulence while flying from Riyadh to some other name I can't pronounce in Saudi Arabia before landing. The cockpit crew followed standard operating procedures to ensure safety of passengers on board. There were no injuries reported, and the passengers were safely deboarded at the destination. Okay. Really boring. That's why you don't see that in the article. Okay. So don't get sucked in and stay away from these things until you can either ask one of us about what the heck went on here, maybe if you don't understand it, or you're strong enough to endure those kinds of things. So any kind of report on people who read headlines, whether they're going to get better, worse, or stay the same, Eric?
Yeah.
Enough? Okay.
Generally speaking, there were a couple answers, and it tends to amp up the
Sure.
anxiety, right? I mean, that's what they're designed to do, you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I love, actually, it sounds much better in English than in German, but there is this catchy phrase in journalism that says, if it bleeds, it leads, right?
Yeah.
So, and if it doesn't bleed, make it look like it bleeds, you know? So it really is just our biases, right? Others have figured those out, and they don't always have our best interest at heart, right? So what we're teaching you is taking control, mastering really your own ability to respond to whatever trigger, just like Diane said, there was a trigger, you know, it felt not normal. How she responded to that trigger, right? That is really what we're teaching here and what we're teaching Fearful Flyers. So,
and coming up soon in our 201 online global online course is in module 1, we talk all about this. You don't have a choice how you think. You don't. Read the book Thinking Fast and Slow. It's about that. If I say how much is 2 and 2, my audience says 4. If I say how much is 17 times 23, they say, I'll get back to you, Ron. Okay. That is something that is in your brain. You cannot do that differently. And so some of you are going out there with with the bucket half full because you just don't know enough about the fact that some of the things coming out of your brain that make you feel crazy are totally normal. And stick with us and we'll help you out with that. So any other closing remarks or anything?
No.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, thanks again, Diane. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Dieter. And thanks to all of you out there watching us. This has been another episode of Clear for Takeoff Live, and we'll be back next week. I promise. We'll see you, everybody. Have a great week. Stay safe.
Bye.